But I do not believe that Genesis 1 and Genesis 2 and 3 describe something which are fundamentally different from each other. Now, why exactly? I guess the first question would be, why are these two narratives separated? That's not a difficult question to answer. The reason that they're separated is because there's a certain structure in the design of the 6+1 creation days that would be compromised if the kinds of things that were included in Genesis 2 to 3 were just inserted in there when Genesis 1 is narrated. The only way in which the information that God wants to communicate here could be communicated in the way that he wished was for these narratives to be separated so that you get the look at the 6+1 creation days. And then you have, with that information already in your mind, and then you have a zoom in on days 6 and 7. And that's point 2. Genesis 3, in my view, and there are various views in church history about the chronology of what exactly happened here. But in my view, Genesis 3 describes what happened on the first Sabbath. Now, one reason I think that is because, as James Jordan has pointed out, if you look at various creation week patterns throughout the Bible, and there are many such patterns, the creation week is one of the most common literary devices that's used in the Bible. You can find it, for example, in the book of Revelation all over the place. Let me just show you this in the book of Revelation, show you that I'm not making stuff up here. Revelation chapter, no, I'll use it on my computer. Creation week patterns are those patterns where you have a set of 7. And whenever you have a set of 7, you should look at each member of that set and ask, does it have something to do with what is described in the corresponding creation day? Okay. So in Revelation 16, this is the classic way that you can find out if there's actually a creation week pattern. In Revelation 16, the 4th angel poured out his bowl on the sun, and it was allowed to scorch people with fire. They were scorched by the fierce heat, and they cursed the name of God who had the power over the plagues. They did not repent and give him glory. So the kind of easy way to see if there's a creation week pattern is to look at the 4th slot, because the 4th slot is usually the most straightforward, because on the 4th creation day, you've got the sun, moon, and stars, which are made. Well, here we have the angel pouring out his bowl on the sun here. Or you can look here at the second bowl here. The second angel poured out his bowl into the sea, and it became like the blood of a corpse, and every living thing died that was in the sea. Well, what happens on the second creation day? You've got the separation of the waters above from the waters below. There are various other connections between the other bowls, but those would take more time to actually parse out in more detail. You also see the same kind of thing happening in Revelation 19 to 20. And Revelation 19 to 20, as I recall, describes it in terms of 7 instances of then I saw. So, for example, you have the 7th then I saw has to do, as I recall, with, actually I might be mistaken on this one. I have an article on this specifically, so I'm just going to see if I can find that real quickly, because it's pretty cool. Yes, I did actually find it. I was almost giving up. Okay, so Revelation 19 to 20, there are 8 instances of and I saw, or then I saw. So sometimes in a creation week pattern, you've got 8 because the 8th day, i.e. the 8th day circumcision, the 8th day always has to do with resurrection, glorification, etc. So in Revelation 19 to 20, you have in 2011, you have the great white throne and him who is seated on it. Well, that's Christ himself. That's the last Adam. The great white throne is man finally being given his exalted place in creation. In 20 Verse 12, you have, then I saw the dead, great and small, standing before the throne. The books were opened. Another book was opened, which is the book of life. The dead were judged by what was written in the books according to what they had done. That's an easy connection with the Sabbath, because the Sabbath is all about judgment. The Sabbath is always about bringing things to their completion. And then the eighth day is consistently going to be associated with the new creation. And that's exactly what you have in 21, verse 1. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away. So why is it that you have 7 instances of and I saw, and then you have an eighth one? Well, because the first 7 kind of encapsulate and bring the first creation week to its conclusion. And then the eighth day is the first day, right? So Sunday is the eighth day of the preceding week and the first day of the following week. Another cool instance of creation week patterns, I still have in mind, by the way, the question that I was originally answering, so I will complete that. Another instance is, this is a pretty cool one. It's in Genesis 37. In Genesis 37, we've got the narrative of Joseph, and this is actually split into 7 sections as well. The 4th section describes the dream where the sun, the moon, and the 11 stars were bowing down to Joseph. So Joseph is the 12th star, and this is talking about the 12 constellations. You don't have little points of light bowing down. You have, these are constellations, and the constellations of the zodiac are mentioned several times throughout the Bible, which is why they're actually in Orthodox churches. You can find Orthodox churches with the Israelite prophets or the apostles, and then you've got the constellations as well, as human beings have been exalted as the stars of heaven. And anyway, the sun, moon, and stars bow down. And what's the preceding dream? Well, the preceding dream is we were binding sheaves in the field, and behold, my sheaf arose and stood upright. And behold, your sheaves gathered around it and bowed down to my sheaf. Well, this is the harvest of what's made on the 3rd creation day. So the 3rd slot corresponds to the 3rd creation day, which is all about grain, plants, and wine, right? So this is about the sacramental plants, among which you have the sheaves. And then you have, following that, the sun, moon, and stars bowing down to Joseph, which is a heavenly vision. So it corresponds to the 4th creation day, so on and so forth. Plenty of other stuff that could be said on this. Anyway, the reason I brought this up is because the 7th slot in various creation week patterns is consistently associated with a judgment or a fall. Okay, so a person is evaluated on the Sabbath. The Sabbath is where God enters into the context or the sanctuary, where a person is standing. God, by his light, sees them, evaluates them, judges them good or bad, and then they move on to the next week with that judgment kind of in their bones and blood, right? So in the Eucharist, what happens? The Eucharist is the completion of the preceding week and the beginning of the next week. So in relation to the preceding week, it's the bread or the wine, and in relation to the next week, it's the bread. Bread is the kind of food that we'll have in the morning, right? I mean, just think about what you eat in the morning. In the morning, you tend to eat cereal or pancakes, lots of grains, right? In the evening, that's where you have wine. If a person drinks lots of wine in the morning, we generally think something is up. There's a reason, theologically speaking, why people are inclined to eat certain kinds of food in the morning and other kinds of food in the evening. So the fact that the fall of various characters tends to happen in the sabbatical slot is at least suggestive of the idea that what is going on in Genesis 2-3 is the description of what happened on the 6th and 7th creation days. We see in Genesis, remember, and you have to remember, I know you know this, but you have to remember its relevance to this story, that evening precedes morning. So if, in fact, the fall happened on the Sabbath, well, it would happen in the evening of the preceding solar day, right? So in the morning of the 6th day, you have man and the beasts. Man gives names to the beasts. Man is completed with woman. And then a few hours later, you have the narrative in Genesis chapter 3. You have the fall. And then what does it say? The eyes of them both were opened. They knew. Notice that word. They knew. This is the first knowledge that they possess. They knew that they were naked, and they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves loincloths. It's interesting that this is the first use of this word for know in the context of man actually knowing something, because in Genesis 4 we read Adam knew Eve his wife. So while I am not inclined to agree with those fathers and writers, I mean, there are those fathers and writers who say that sexual relations actually began after the fall. It's possible that that's the case, but there are those who take another view, and these days I'm a little more persuaded by that. But it is nevertheless the case that there seems to be some kind of relationship here between the tree of knowledge and this idea of knowing Eve, his wife. I think part of the reason for that is because to know his wife in such a way that a child is conceived is the first manifestation of real authority that the human being is given, right? So a man's home is his castle, that's his kingdom. And God says, rule. This is the first context in which a person rules. If a king is going to be an effective king, he must be an effective father. The priest's first church is his family. There's a million different ways in which you could say this, or contexts in which this spiritual principle is borne out. But I think one of the reasons that Adam's firstborn goes bad is because he was not equipped to exercise authority in the way that was required of him because of his seizure of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. So we've talked before about how the seizure of the tree of knowledge of good and evil is all about the seizure of the crown. Okay, knowledge of good and evil is language that is used of authority, dominion, and kingship. Solomon prays for wisdom to discern between good and evil. When Joseph is elevated in authority and given a robe by Pharaoh and a staff is put in his hand, it's said that he has the Spirit of God to discern between good and evil. He has wisdom. All of this language is used of the tree of knowledge, and it's used of various kings and authority figures in the Bible. But in order to effectively adjudicate these various difficult situations, you actually have to have certain wisdom that's born of experience. That is what habituation is all about. Habituation is this process whereby we are more and more gradually inclined to a particular direction rather than a different direction. And the more inclined we are in that direction, the easier it is for us to keep being inclined in that direction. This is the law of the conservation of motion applied to a spiritual level. And I'm not just making a joke here. I think that when you see the ways in which spiritual principles are borne out in concrete life, I think you can see that actually the patterns which are inherent in the nature of things physically are genuinely parabolic of spiritual life, because the physical is a manifestation or an overflow of what goes on spiritually. Another example of this, I don't want to say fun example because it's not very fun at all. Whatever you think of the war, I think we can all agree that it's appalling that it has happened in the first place. Before there was a Russo-Ukrainian war, there was a Russo-Ukrainian schism. The inner wiring which binds together the human family is spiritual. It's in the church. To break that wiring is going to have downstream consequences on the physical plane, and it's going to eventually produce bloodshed, as pretty much every schism has. The Great Schism continues to have these catastrophic consequences on the political level. If you just look at the way in which Europe is divided, Europe is essentially divided between those nations which are Roman Catholic or were Roman Catholic, and those nations which are or were Orthodox. And then Ukraine is kind of a mixture. It's because it has both Ukrainian uniates and then the Orthodox Church in Ukraine. In any case, the reason that I started going on this tangent was because I wanted to say I think there's good reason here. Oh, I didn't finish the thought I was going to finish, which is that they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves loincloths. Well, that's something which is going to take a few hours. And it says, and they heard the sound of the Lord God walking in the garden in the spirit of the day, not in the cool of the day, but in the spirit for the day, i.e., the Spirit of God is again coming. This is the end of the week. So the Spirit of God is approaching, just as he did at the beginning of the last week, because he is about to initiate the next week of creation history. So the Spirit, and the word here is Spirit, he comes in the spirit of the day. Well, what's the day? There was evening, there was morning, the first day. It's signified by light. There's this enormous sound, and Adam and Eve, they run for their lives. Literally, they run for their lives. Then God issues a judgment. He sentences them to death, but a death that is going to be realized very gradually so that they are able to repent. Now, had they partaken of the tree of life then, their direct experience of divine life would have been such that it would have fixed their will in whatever direction it was at that point ordered. Now, my point in reading this passage to you is to sketch out what I think is the most plausible chronology of what's going on, and that is that the fig leaves that are sewn together are sewn together. I mean, these people have no experience in sewing things together. They're sewn together overnight. And then when God comes in the spirit of the day, well, he comes in light, he comes in brightness. That's when the spirit is coming. This is the morning of the Sabbath day, i.e. the end of the Sabbath day. So we've got good reason, I think, to say that this is happening in the same chronological context as Genesis 1 is happening. But, beyond that argument, the narrative that follows presumes that Adam is the same person in Genesis 1 and Genesis 2 and 3. Now, I think the easy way to see this is Genesis 5. Genesis 5 says, this is the book of the generations of Adam. Now, generations always means offspring of. So in Genesis 2, you've got the generations of the heavens and the earth. That means the offspring of heaven and earth, the offspring of the Spirit of God on the one hand, the dust of the ground on the other hand. And that produces man, because man is a microcosm of heaven and earth. He unites spiritual and corporeal realities in himself. So the generations of Adam, that means that which proceeds out from Adam, that which Adam begets. Well, this is the book of the generations of Adam. When God created man, he made him in the likeness of God. Male and female, he created them, and he blessed them, and he named them Adam when they were created. When Adam had lived 130 years, so on and so forth. So here we have the language of Genesis 1, and the person whose life has been narrated for us in Genesis 2 to 3, all folded together as a single person, because I don't think there's any real evidence that he was anything other than a single person the whole way through.